Ukrainian troops have pierced, impregnated, or even reached the three rings of defenses that the Russian military and its outside contractors erected along the fault line between Ukraine and eastern Ukraine.
There's some evidence that north of the village of Robotyno, in the direction of Verboye, and I might be saying that village wrong, so I apologize for anybody who don't take my pronunciation of Russian language to the bank. But in the direction of Verboye, there was the initial line of Dragon's Teeth, and there's some evidence that Ukrainian reconnaissance units, dismounted infantry, have crossed over and have advanced towards a tree line in that area. They're being slaughtered as we speak. No Ukrainian vehicles have gone through. And the Dragon's Teeth, of course, aren't designed to stop infantry. They're designed to stop armored vehicles. And no Ukrainian armored vehicles have reached it. No Ukrainian engineering units have come to break these obstacles apart. The obstacles are doing what they're intended to do, to stop an armored advance and force the Ukrainians to go forward with infantry where they're being slaughtered as we speak.
Well, that is a very enlightening and sophisticated explanation, Scott. And I want those watching and listening now to compare it to General Milley's explanation, where he says the Ukrainian troops have penetrated layers of Russian defense.
Generally speaking, the Ukrainians have penetrated several layers of this defense. It is not 100% penetrated yet, but they've penetrated several of the layers. And they're going very slow, preserving their combat power, and very deliberately through this defensive belt that stretches the entire length and breadth of Russian-occupied Ukraine. So for the critics that are out there, I would say that there's plenty of fighting weather left. There's plenty of combat power remaining, and the Ukrainians have absolutely no intent to stop.
Well, he's substantially misleading, and quite frankly, Scott, I think he's talking about you.
Well, I mean, I hope so. Look, I'd love to have a conversation with General Milley on the record. Maybe you could facilitate it. I doubt he'll do it. But, when he says, generally speaking, several layers, well, if he's going to talk about layers, maybe he's talking about the flexible defensive zone in front of the first line of defense, because there is this defensive zone that's designed to receive the attack. They use minefields to break up the attack. They channel the attacking forces into predicted lanes to get hit by artillery. And then the Russians have troops that are dug in who then withdraw to secondary positions, still in the forward defensive zone ahead of the first line of defense. And so what he's talking about is maybe penetrating that minefield, penetrating the initial trenches because the Russians withdrew, and then penetrating the next line before they get to the Dragon's Teeth. If that's the case, then I guess they have penetrated several layers of Russian defense. What he's missing, though, is that it's taken the Ukrainians more than 3 months to do this, and this is something that any attacking force should accomplish in the first day or the second day. You don't get hung up in the forward defensive zone, the crumble zone, for 3 months. That's not a victory. And he's saying they have 40 days left. Let me tell you what will happen in the next 40 days. They're all going to die. Look, in the Poltava region, the recruiting office, they've acknowledged for every 100 soldiers that have been mobilized and sent forward, basically 80 to 90 of them are finished, done. Dead, crippled, wounded, prisoner, out of combat. 80 to 90% of the Ukrainian troops that have been mobilized have been taken off the battlefield. Hey, General Milley, I'm a simple Marine. I ain't too good at math, but I'll tell you this. If you're losing 9 out of 10 guys, you ain't doing too well.
Wow. Is the kill ratio still 7-1 with about 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead?
Whether it's 400, 500,000, it's a lot of Ukrainian dead. Vladimir Putin spoke of a 10-1 ratio. I think that is a ratio that can be applied at specific parts of the fight. Look, the Ukrainians have lethal weapons. And they're killing Russians. There's no doubt about it. The Russians every once in a while get caught out and they get hammered. And yeah, so we're talking, 7-1, 8-1, 10-1. But let's say it's 10-1. That's in the best interest of Russia. Let's say it's 400,000 Ukrainian dead. That's 40,000 dead Russians. That's a lot of dead Russians. That's a lot of sad mommies. That's a lot of distraught wives. That's a lot of traumatized children. Russia's paying a heavy price for this war, and I don't think anybody should ever minimize that. We talk about the Ukrainian casualties, as we should, because we're responsible for those, but we're also responsible for the dead Russians. Could you imagine trying to tell the American people about a conflict where they've lost, in a span of 600 days, 40 to 50,000 dead? It took us 10 years to lose that many in Vietnam. And that broke the heart, the spirit of America. Now we're talking in a period of 600 days, Russia's lost upwards of 50,000 dead. That's a lot of dead. This is a war, the scope and scale of the violence many Americans can't understand. The U.S. Army just published a research paper that said if we went to war with Russia in these environments, we'd lose 3,600 men per day.
Wow.
Are the American people ready for this? Is General Milley ready for this? And the answer is no. He literally went to the Biden administration and said, don't go to war against Russia or China, because we're not going to win.
Here's what